today I would like to introduce you to Brian McCarty. He's my personal trainer. He's a fitness coach here at Jacked in Scottsdale, Arizona. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to really focus on today, the recent studies have shown that exercise can actually make a difference in the course of the disease of multiple sclerosis. Brian, could you explain to me why this is?
There's a couple different reasons. So multiple sclerosis is a neurological disease that affects the nerves in your brain and your spinal cord, the sheaths in the nerves in your brain and your spinal cord. So any time your body continually wants to create homeostasis, make itself back to a normal level. So anytime you introduce a new element that challenges your brain in different ways to do a single motion exercise or a compound exercise, you're creating new pathways that are helping that process out. And I've seen it firsthand, whether it's MS or it's fibromyalgia or even just a bad head injury. This is the process that helps reconnect those pathways to make you function correctly.
So is it true that exercise then is stimulating the nerves and the muscles? And of course the communication between the brain and the nerves is kind of being hampered with the disease process.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like that old philosophy, use it or lose it?
Right. It's absolutely that philosophy mixed with a lot of patience. With any affliction that affects your brain, it's a slow recovery process because you have to go through all these steps, and if there's something that's blocking those steps, you have to create a new way around that to get that connection going again. So yes, definitely there's a fine line between really pushing yourself and then knowing when to pull back and just listen to your body. The worst thing you could do is try to adopt someone without any of these issues. Their philosophy of training, which is usually push yourself, push yourself, push yourself. This is one of the ones you absolutely want to give yourself time, recognize all the imbalances in your body, and really focus on those before you start making your steps to whatever your goal is, weight loss, muscle gain, that stuff.
Okay, so I've been working with Brian for not quite 2 years. I came in after a really bad case of the flu that had kind of ravaged my body. It had gone up, visited my heart, visited my vision, really did damage to the veins in the legs. And so I came in, I wasn't in very good shape.
Right.
So what were the things that you noticed that you corrected right away when I came into you?
With a lot of people with any sort of injury, whether it's a disease, whether your arm got pulled off or something, there's a dialogue that has to take place, and you have to be in a position where you're going to trust that I know what you're feeling, not necessarily having been told. So first thing is just create that dialogue and find a common ground and get the idea of where you want to go overall physically and what your immediate problems are. Once we establish that, then, with anybody, you go through an assessment process that literally is just checking all the muscle imbalances, whether your shoulders are too high on one side, or you're leaning forward, or too far back, or all the way from your head down to your toes, and you address that. Once you start correcting those imbalances, then you can start actually training anywhere from walking up a step to lifting weights. Because everyone's different, you have to find that process and what the problem is. Because a lot of people have this built-in notion when they're sick they can't do anything, or they resign themselves to not doing anything. And you have to ease people into, all of this is a difficult process. Getting injured, getting sick, that's a difficult thing. Rising above that and then coming and addressing the problem head on without taking a bunch of unnecessary medication. there's a trust that has to be there because your pain level's in my hands effectively, and if I train you wrong or if you're being shown something wrong, then that can create further imbalances. So really it's just about finding our even playing field, getting you there, and then deciding, well, I want broader shoulders or I want a slimmer waist, and then attacking.
I was referred to Brian by my massage therapist. I would go and have regular massages when my muscles knotted up or tightened up. I remember that one of the first things that he corrected and worked with me is I had gotten used to standing with my feet quite a ways apart. It was for balance, and I was really turning my toes out. And when he started focusing on being able to straighten my feet and just be able to walk in a normal path, I knew I had found the right trainer, and I was really blessed with that. Just this week, I read an article put out on multiple sclerosis and the difference between exercise and functional exercise. Could you talk to me about that a little bit?
Exercise is more of a broad term. You're addressing anywhere from the standard, I need to lose 20 pounds for a wedding, to I want to put 20 pounds on for this sports-specific event. Functional strength training or any sort of functional exercise is focusing on those muscle groups that you use on a daily basis. So from start to finish, from young to old, these muscle groups we use in some fashion. And we work there, and the nice thing about working those muscle groups is you have all these assister muscles, and they have assister muscles. So you get this kind of transfer of training effect to where you might be training your shoulders, you might be training your stomach, but you're going to get some glutes, and you're going to some pecs, and you're going to get all this other stuff. So functional is nice because there's a certain level of strength we just want to maintain for our whole life, right? There's never a point where you've sacrificed your strength level out of laziness and I can't pick up a gallon of milk or carry your own groceries and everything. So really, any muscle group that assists you doing your day-to-day routine, that's mainly what functional training is all about. And you progress from there. And especially for anybody with these sorts of neurological issues, even down to muscular issues, this is a great starting place because you have, in a sense, you're already starting with this imbalance, whether it's internally or it's visible on the outside. The functional stuff helps you visualize how you're going to adopt, picking up a 40-pound weight, how that translates to picking up, a 40-pound bucket in your car or something like that, and how to do it properly, and gives you just the presence of mind to know you can do these things too. Because I think after a certain amount of time with any sort of injury or disease, we just start getting in the groove where we can't do things. We're in this groove where you just give up to some degree and well, I won't be able to do this. And I know from personal experience, like, your body wants to get better, no matter what. And it can do amazing things on its own if you train it in the right way. So,
I think that's the thing about really living with natural medicine and using natural medicine. You have to understand that you know your body best, and that your body with your spirit and your mind wants to work together towards wellness, towards that well-being.
sure.
And I love being here because Brian was always telling me, okay, after you work out, eat some protein. Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough rest? On the days that I came in that I wasn't strong and there was weaknesses, he, even though I wanted to try and push through it, no, we're going to back off and we're going to do this. He taught me the difference between a simple exercise and a compound or complex
Right.
exercise where it works several different muscle groups. I never knew in the arm there were 3 different
Sure, yeah.
areas that you had to work the arm. And so he looked at me as a whole individual. He looked at my body, he looked at my spirit and my soul. And I trusted him because he showed me that he was paying attention from the time I walked in the door as to how well I was functioning that day. That then developed this amazing trust and confidence that has taken me back into more strength than I ever expected to have, being 68 years old. And so I'm really, really grateful for that. His attitude was always very low-key, but very supportive. How important is exercise and working with this? How important is attitude when you're exercising, working with chronic health?
So from a trainer's perspective, you can't walk into any session expecting you're going to get through the whole hour. Like, you have to just have your own playbook of what you want to hit, and starting with the most pressing issue or most pressing exercise you want to address to the least pressing, and you just kind of go down that checklist, right? And you can usually gauge, especially with you emote, the second you walk in, if something's going wrong, I can usually tell. If you're having a great day, I can usually tell that too. So right in that moment, you kind of get the idea, okay, we're going to be able to go 30 minutes, we're going to go the whole hour. This isn't going to be a problem. But you also still have to be prepared for energy just dipping at any point, or some of the other side effects of having MS, like dizziness or just muscle confusion in general. So the attitude, my attitude has to be like, we're going to get through this, because we are going to get through this. We're not doing anything that's designed to hurt you. It's only designed to benefit you. And as long as I can make that hour something, there's been plenty of times where we really only got maybe 30, 35 minutes of actual exercise, but you still feel like you've had the whole hour because we're conversing, we're talking about what's going on, the reason why you're affected in that way in the moment. And if I come at you in a negative mindset, then that's what you're going to have, this negative attitude. But if I stay positive, which is really easy to do, just putting yourself in someone else's shoes, then you can work around almost anything. And I can generally get a little more out of people if I'm like, all right, you did great, you did great that way, but let's try the same thing, and just turn your hands a little bit, or turn this one arm a little bit. And it's just really important to recognize your strengths, because we all internalize any of our handicaps throughout every facet of our life every day. So in this one moment, there's nothing but positivity coming from a gym. There shouldn't be, because you've decided to walk in and make this change. Like, who am I to come at you negative and say, oh, you're doing it all wrong? It's awful. Yeah. So your attitude has to be reflected by my attitude, and you being positive and getting through some of these things I know are challenging, and yet I know that you're perfectly capable of doing, and even some of them you've done regularly in the past. Just being there, and there's an emotional process that comes with us not being able to do something we know we can do anymore, and I can't shake it into you how to do these things. I just have to support you with it. And you always hit the ground running with it. You're always very positive about it. There's very few and far between where a negative attitude actually impacts our workout, which is, if everyone could do that, then everyone would be in great shape.
So I know some days I come in and I'm great attitude and I'm working hard, and then all of a sudden, he will see that when I start to fatigue, I start losing form or function, and he's quick to say, nope, we're stopping here, we'll move on to a different area of the body. Where I would have, if I was doing it on my own, I would have just said, oh, I have 15 I have to do and I have to push through, and I lose the proper form and therefore the benefit of the exercise. There's been other days where I thought I was doing fine, but in doing certain movements, we would see that there was a certain weakness in the body, and he was quick to pick up. And you could just see his mind working, that he would approach it a different way. So we were actually seeing what was going on with that muscle. So you are so good at what you do, and you're so compassionate and understanding. So I know there's a personal story that you has led you to where you are
Absolutely.
today.
Yeah.
Would you be so kind as to share your personal story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, 15 years ago, I was a completely different person, completely different body type and work ethic and all that. And I was a cable installer in Southern California. And one day I was, up on a phone pole, and my ladder got hit, and I fell about 30 feet. And in the process of the fall, I broke a couple bones, and I blew out my entire lumbar spine. And nicked my spinal cord in a couple of places. So the process, the recovery ahead was going to be long. I mean, once it was all said and done, I had 2 fractured vertebrae. Like I said, every disc from L1 down to S1 was blown out, just irreparable. So I was fortunate enough to find the right doctor to do the right surgery for my age group. I can't necessarily say it would be something that is adaptable to someone 20 years older than I was at the time, but I was really fortunate in that regard. But they went, they replaced all the discs and scoped them and did, as much work back as we can. And it took me about 2 years to really relearn how to walk, run, jump, just do normal things. And it's a very painful process, especially trying to, just knowing these things and know you can do it. Put on your socks, wiggle your feet, all that stuff. It's emotionally painful, it's physically painful because your body doesn't want to do it at that point. But through the process of recovery, I was getting very tired of hearing, and from very great, really reputable people, what I couldn't do and what I shouldn't do. And it always came from like a doctor who isn't necessarily thinking of me as an individual. That you kind of get lumped into this category. Mm-hmm. And then there's a list. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And you're just sitting there going, I can do that, come on. And then physical therapists, they're designed to push you, but play it safe at the same time. So, and there was always this level, and I was like 22 at the time. So there was always this, fight in me that's like, I can do these things. Why are you telling me I can't? And I got really sick of it. And a friend of mine pointed me to a personal trainer. And I started training with her 4 times a week for about 7 months, up until I think I went from a wheelchair to a walker to crutches to a walking partner, and that whole process with her. So that whole process, I fell in love with personal training. Because a lot of people have this idea that personal training is just to get very big and very muscular, but really it's just about creating your best self and giving yourself the opportunity to push yourself. My job is really just to make sure you don't hurt yourself along the way and give you a correct kind of order in getting whatever results that you want. But there's a lot of people out there that think it's just for getting huge and to look like the kind of superheroes vision we have of everyone nowadays. But yeah, I became a trainer as a direct result of having that experience 15. I mean, I think it was more like 12 by the time it was all said and done, about 12 years ago. And that fueled me to completely change my life. I was a construction, I had only done construction at that point. I went back to college, I got my degrees, my certifications, and I hit the ground running with training after that. So it was a horrible event that had a great result.
I feel really blessed that I was directed to Jack Jim and to Brian, because the compassion and the understanding that I felt every day walking through those doors, no matter how I felt, physically or mentally, that compassion kept fueling my desire to live a very active life. I have felt very supported with all the staff here at Jack Jim, and Brian is a very important part of my professional health team to help me be my authentic Beth, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for letting us come into your house and do this video, and I hope it helps all of you out there see how important exercise is I recognize that at my age and with my health history, I need to exercise every day the rest of my life to stay active and dynamic, and that's what I want out of life. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. This is a stability ball plank. Addresses your full body, designed to address your core and give you upper body stability as well. This is a great simple exercise. All right, this is a standard deadlift, lightweight, but again, it's a compound exercise and addresses most of the musculature in your body. So if you can walk up to the bar, I want you to keep your feet right under your hips, and your toes in front of your palms. So nice and neutral. The bar should be set right above the length of your toes, right about there. You're going to bend down, slightly on your knees, keep your chest high, but nice and easy. Drop down and grab the bars. You should be right outside your hips. You can pull up. Right there. Flat back. Good. Again. A couple more. During this exercise, you want to make sure your back stays flat.